yeah, we can go live. Yeah.
Okay, now showing that we are live. So good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to today's meeting of the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board. I'm the chair, I'm Councillor Andrew Scopes. At this point, I should clarify that to members of the committee, but also to anyone watching, that this is a consultative meeting of the board. And because we're not meeting in person, but obviously we're doing that for reasons due to the global pandemic. Today's meeting will hold almost all of the formalities that a normal meeting would hold. We'll still challenge officers, we'll still talk about issues that are relevant, but we will need to formalise any decisions made at the next in-person meeting due to government legislation saying that all council meetings need to be or decision-making meetings need to be in person. I'm now going to just go through the board and ask you to introduce yourselves. Because we're online, obviously I need to say your name first so you know know the order. So I'll invite you one at a time if that's okay. So firstly, Councillor Hamilton.
Morning everyone, Councillor Sharon Hamilton, Meanwood and Moortown Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Carlisle.
Morning, Councillor Peter Carlisle, Carlin Farsley Ward.
Councillor Chapman.
Morning, Councillor Chapman from Rothwell Ward.
Thank you. Councillor Firth.
Good morning, Councillor Firth, Harewood Ward.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna.
Good morning, Chair. I'm having trouble unmuting. Councillor McKenna, Armley Ward Councillor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hutchinson.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Hutchison, Morley North Ward.
Councillor Renshaw.
Good morning, Councillor Karen Renshaw, as in Robin Hood Ward, substituting for Councillor Hesselwood.
Thank you very much for coming, Councillor Renshaw. Councillor Robinson.
Morning, Councillor Matthew Robinson from the Harewood Ward.
Thank you. And Councillor Seary.
Councillor Simon Seary, Putney Ward.
Thank you. We've also got a couple of exec board members here for various items. So could Councillor Cooper, could you introduce yourself?
Morning everybody, Councillor Deborah Cooper, Executive Board Member for Resources.
And Councillor Harland.
Hi, morning again everybody. I'm Councillor Mary Harland. I represent the Kippets and Methley Ward and I'm the Exec Board Member for Communities.
Thank you. And in terms of officers supporting today's meeting, Rob Clayton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Rob Clayton, Principal Scrutiny Advisor for the board.
Thank you. Andy Booth.
Good morning, Andy Booth, and I'll be the clerk to the board this morning.
Thank you. And Debbie Oldman.
Councillor Scopes, yes. Debbie's not in today. It's Andy doing the minutes.
Oh, great. Okay. Andy. Yep, that makes sense. Good. I think the other officers, if you introduce yourself when we get to your paper, if that's okay. Otherwise, yeah, that'd be helpful, and then we know why you're here and what item, if that's okay. Okay, so moving on to the main agenda, if that's okay. So firstly, are there any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests that need to be made? I'd take silence as no. Okay, thank you very much. So move on to the draft minutes. I think they're on page 5. I'd first take matters of accuracy. Are there any matters of accuracy anyone wants to raise? I take silence as you're comfortable with how they've been written. Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any indications at all. So on to matters arising in the first instance. Rob, can you run through the matters arising, please?
Thank you, Chair. Two items really that I'd like to draw to members' attentions. Minute 97, which is relates to a previous item, letter on long-term funding for adult social care. Firstly, just to inform the board that the letter to government was reissued, and we currently await a response on that item.
Thank you. And on that item, I understand Councillor Robinson is happy to see if he's got any party contacts that might be able to help with a response. Is that correct, Councillor Robinson?
Yeah, very happy to do that and contact ministers as well and chase it up.
Thank you very much. Okay, carry on, Rob.
Yeah, and then the other item is in relation to minute 99. Again, the previous board had an interest in the number of staff who'd left under the Early Leavers Initiative and the percentage of those who were in desk-based roles. So just to inform that I have heard back from HR, and it's a third of those that left. So as 845 staff left the authority, and a third of those were in desk-based roles. That just picks up that loose end from last year.
Thank you, Rob. Will you be able to put that in an email to board members as well, just for
Absolutely.
our records?
Yep. No problem.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Are there any other matters arising that members want to raise? No, I can't see anyone indicating. So we'll move on. Okay, so on to page 11, scrutiny board terms of reference, and over to Rob again.
Thank you, Councillor Scopes. Yeah, just briefly on this. This sets out the board's terms of reference for members' information. There are a number of appendices with this. Appendix 3 sets out the remits of the board and how they are aligned to officer and executive functions. Appendix 2 refers to Article 6, which sets out the differences between the board's responsibilities. And in general, it's just for members' information, so we're aware of remit in terms of reference for the year.
Thank you. Do any board members have any comments on any of the terms of reference? I would just like to, while people are thinking about whether they comment, on page 19, the penultimate paragraph talks about avoiding duplication of work. I think it's also worth noting that working together in terms of possible joint inquiries is another real strong element to how we can bring scrutiny to the council, so where there's cross themes. And I think, if I'm honest, where we are resources, we probably have the most likelihood of cross themes, because resources effectively affect every area. And so whilst we need to make sure we stay within our remit, we also may need to work with other scrutiny boards where there's a real finance issue in that directorate. So I just wanted to highlight that as a sort of a clear possibility for future joint working. Is there anything else that people want to raise? No, I can't see anyone indicating on that. So we'll move on. So co-opted members, I think that's you again, Rob.
It is, Councillor Scope. Sorry to hog the limelight, but
right.
Yeah, linked really to some of the comments you just made there. Co-option is a means by which the board can bring on expertise. Now, that could be from other scrutiny boards as an example of how it might be used, but the report in general sets out how co-option can be done by board and seeks to take board members' views on that today as to whether they believe there should be any co-optees. I mean, a very rough outline of how it would work with there are two ways of doing it: up to 5 non-voting co-opted members for a term of office that does not go beyond the annual meeting, or up to 2 non-voting co-opted members for a term of office that relates to the duration of a particular inquiry. So really just to get any views on that, Chair.
Thank you. Currently, I don't have any plans to bring any co-opted members in, but I think it's worth members knowing that that's a possibility. Okay, I can't see anyone indicating to speak, so I think we should carry on. Okay, so moving on to item 5, which is, I think it's Tim's item.
Yeah,
So,
yep.
Councillor Hamilton.
I was just going to ask, as this scrutiny board had co-op members prior, and you know, where were they from, you know, which service, etc. Because obviously you told us you have no plan and it could change, but I just wanted to know.
Yes, that's a fair question. Rob, have you got any historic knowledge on that?
So the co-option item, so because of the pandemic and the way it affected meetings, it didn't come up last year. But my knowledge of it is that the board hasn't traditionally had co-opted members, but that wouldn't preclude that from happening either this year or in future years.
Yeah, in my mind, there's two possible ways that we'd have a co-opted reasons to have a co-opted member. So one might be if we did a joint inquiry and we wanted someone from a different scrutiny board to aid our understanding. That's one way, and we wanted them to definitely participate. And I guess the other option might be is if we were looking at something which involved a private sector contract and we wanted a outside expert to help us, and we see that certainly with the adults and health with outside independent people. I think it's probably less likely that we'd need it in this portfolio because we have a large number of internal finance experts, and certainly some of us have worked in the finance sector who are board members. But we should still keep it as a possibility. But thanks for those questions, Councillor Hamilton. Okay, I'll move on to item 5. Officers, when you speak, can you just make sure you assume that we've read the item and introduce yourself before you start? Thank you. Over to you, Tim.
Good morning, councillors. My name is Tim Rollett. I work in the council's intelligence and policy service, and along with my team, I've got responsibility for producing this report. The performance report draws on the most recent performance information for our key performance indicators. These are the indicators that show how on track we are to delivering the priorities in the Best Council plan. And for the purposes of this board, that includes the main areas of culture and also an efficient, enterprising and healthy organisation. And within that second area, we've got things like finance, digital information and HR aspects that we look at. One of the reasons why we report performance in June is so that the board can look at the areas included in the performance report and identify areas of further work that they would like to do during the year. So these sort of signposting reasons. And we've got colleagues here from the various services that are responsible for performance information to answer specific queries on those areas. So, like I say, we've updated the performance indicators of the most recent set of results. We've included some commentary in the report to provide further explanations, and we're happy to answer questions on those from the board.
Thank you very much for that, Tim. I'll bring in Councillor Firth, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the introduction, Tim. It's a really interesting report, as always. I just wanted to ask some particular questions because there are some areas that are very interesting around with HR, the representation in our workforce. And those particularly, there is I think the starkest figure is looking at our minority representation. But the one area I wanted to cover, particularly given that Carers Week has just been and gone, is given the situation over the past year with COVID and with the pandemic, obviously our situation with carers, I wanted to ask a bit more about how we feel that the council is supporting carers, especially given the situation that we're in at the moment, and actually improving on where we are at the moment in terms of not only those, but those who are disabled in the workforce, to ensure that they have a healthy and also complementary work pattern to be able to recruit more into the council. And what is the council doing about it?
Yes, we've got some colleagues from HR here who might be able to provide more information on that. And also, you'll notice from the report that during the year we've undertaken a number of surveys with the council staff, which will include the staff who are carers, to find out how their experience is going. So if Andy or Graham from HR would like to provide some further comment on that, please.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name's Andy Dom and I work in the HR department. A few issues there that you've raised, Councillor. So just in terms of carers, and I'll pass to Graham, who will be more up to date with the latest, but we do have a very vibrant active carers staff network. So over the last year, councillors that has undertaken a whole range of different supports and activities to support our carers population. As Tim rightly mentioned, we have surveyed that population, particularly over the last year, and we have identified that there are some particular challenges with that group. So we have therefore deliberately enhanced support for that staff network, but also the number of webinars and support functions available to that population. Graham's on the line, so Graham, would you like to add a bit more to that?
Can't hear Graham at this point. So maybe we need to just, does anyone else have any more comments to provide, Councillor Firth? Councillor Firth, if we come back to that in a minute when Graham's sorted out his connection, is that okay?
Yes, Chair. If I could ask, I wanted to ask a supplementary on top of that, if that's okay. But more than
Yeah, we'll definitely come back to that. Graham, can you indicate when you can comment again? Thank you. Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor Carlyle next.
Thanks, Andrew. A couple of points on this, really. I'm jumping around the bullet points probably. One that I always raise, but I think just wanted to highlight, looking at the bottom of page 48 where we've got procurement, I see again that our percentage of money spent with local suppliers has gone up this year, an extra 25 million, which I think is a real boost during obviously the pandemic and supporting local businesses. I noticed that although the percentage of the orders placed with small and medium-sized businesses, the percentage has gone down, but actually it's gone up in value, obviously with a wider spend around things. So I just wanted to really point out those positives, because I think for local and small businesses this has been a difficult time, so really good that the council are increasing the amount of money. The question I had flips back up, probably it might be something that HR can help with anyway when they come back. We've got on page 41 some of the reasons for sickness across the organisation. Number one on there is listed mental health, and I think we can all understand why mental health would have been a particular difficulty across this time. There's then musculoskeletal back and neck problems in there, coming as a second. My question was, one, how much the order of these categories really for sickness has changed during the previous period. I'm a bit concerned maybe some of those back and neck issues or anything, are they due to people perhaps working from home and not having the correct equipment, not having the suitable environment that they may have in the office, and just whether there was any background around those, but really on the shift of those, is there anything that we have to be extra careful with in the new ways of working that we're seeing?
I'm happy to answer that question.
Thanks, please do, Andy.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yeah, it is a good point. Just in terms of the shift, we probably are seeing a slight increase in the prominence of the mental health being the prominent reason for sickness absence. And that has slightly increased at the expense of musculoskeletal. Although the general point I would make is that it is quite sporadic from service to service, department to department. So it is quite variable depending on where you look. You raise a very important point about whether people's changing of working environment has impacted particularly on those factors. And there is some evidence to say that it probably has, although generally speaking, we have seen a decrease in sickness absence over the last year as people's ways of working have shifted and changed quite a bit. We are, however, very mindful about the issue or the challenge of people working remotely in terms of whether or not we are able to safeguard and support individuals. So we have spent a fair bit of time issuing quite a lot of advice and guidance to people working remotely to make sure that they can set up their new working environment in that safe way. So we offer a lot of guidance support online for individuals. We've also issued probably close to about 25,000 bits of kit out to the community, to our workforce, really, and that includes things like desks, tables, chairs, assistive technology, to make sure people have set up their working environment in a safe and appropriate way, which we know is helping. So we are very mindful of that issue, and at the moment we're just monitoring those sickness absence figures that you've referenced. And we'll be shortly launching a hybrid working online training package to give people a bit more support and assurance, to make sure that when they are working remotely, then they are obviously doing so in that safe and appropriate way. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you. Councillor Carlyle, do you want to ever follow up?
Yeah, I think that's good, Chair. I think obviously if people are working in the office, there's the opportunity for people to assist them with their office environment and to overlook it for them. When people are at home, they obviously need that support to know where they're working is healthy and safe, and there's obviously not other people going into their home to look at that. So, but I think that's really positive, the kind of support we're giving.
Thank you. Graham, can you? No, we can't hear you at the moment, Graham. Is it worth exiting and trying to come back in? Yep, great, okay. Okay, I'm going to bring in Jim McKenna. Councillor McKenna, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm looking at the Appendix 2, and I note when we do the comparisons of age profile on Leeds citizens and employees of the council, that 15% of Leeds citizens are aged 16 to 24, but only 6% of our workers are in that age group. Given that the pandemic is going to greatly affect the young, I think this is something that needs careful consideration. And if we go down a bit, 19% of citizens are BAME, and only 14% get jobs with Leeds City Council. And then a really big one on disability, 17% of residents have a long-term illness, but only 6% of our workforce have considered themselves disabled. I think there's big gaps here. I think it's something that we should be looking at very carefully and bring them down. I think we want to be an equal society. I think we want to make sure that all citizens, regardless of their age or disabilities or ethnic origins, have access to work in City Council. And I think this should be a priority. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Andy, do you want to respond to any of that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can, and then I think possibly Graham's back online, so maybe he will want to add. There's quite a lot there. Just in terms of the first issue the councillor reference was obviously about age profiling. That is an issue for us, and you'll see reference there to the work that we're doing with apprenticeships, but also some additional work we've done this year with T-levels. So we are taking a whole range of different actions to try to encourage younger individuals into the workplace as a council. So that's through our apprenticeship work through T-levels, but also working in partnership with our anchor institutions across the city. You've also mentioned about the BAME population in the workplace. That's a big issue for us, and I would stress there that over the last year or so we have launched a race equality plan, which is a 2-year plan to tackle many of the issues that have been raised. So that does look at staff support progression and a whole range of different measures in terms of supporting ethnic minorities within and beyond the workplace. So that's one of our big actions that we have focused on over the last year. And of course, we now have directorate and departmental inclusion plans and equality boards, which are coordinating and managing a lot of this activity across the organisation. So we're hoping that some of those issues will be able to keep putting the pressure on and managing accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. Eve, did you want to come in on this point?
Yes, thanks, Councillor Scopes. It's just a small thing. So just by way of introduction, first of all, hello everybody. I'm Chief Officer for Culture and Economy, and that includes employment and skills. Within that context, Councillor McKenna, we are actually also piloting taking some people on through the Kickstart scheme into city development. That's in partnership with Andy and HR. So if that goes well, and there's scope potentially to do a little more of that as well across the council. So I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you very much.
Can I?
Councillor McKenna, yeah, please do.
Yeah, Andy didn't deal with disability, I note. And that was probably the biggest divergence of all three. The other thing, Eve, it's great to have plans, but do we have targets? Do we have actually fixed targets that we want to see the 6% of young people accessing jobs to maybe 10%? We're an aging workforce and we can't allow that to happen. But plans are all very well, but I do think that we should set targets. And I don't think we've done that. And I think that's something we need to seriously consider. And I would be grateful for a comment on the disability divergence as well, Chair.
Andy, I don't know if you're first person.
Yeah, no, I apologise, Councillor McKenna. In terms of the disability issue, yeah, that is part of our broad inclusion and diversity strategy. We've had, again, a vibrant door network, which should focus particularly on the disability issue. Some of the divergence of the focus there is I think Tim referenced earlier in terms of the survey out to staff and the pulse survey. And what I should have said perhaps earlier is that we've specifically invited people with particular challenges, whether it is because of a disability or a particular challenge, and they can call back, and we have contacted a large number of individuals throughout the year to deal with those particular issues and challenges. I think, Graham, you might now be back online, so do you want to add to the disability issue?
No, we still can't hear you.
No.
Graham, have you tried, in the bottom left-hand corner, there's the microphone. Have you tried clicking in there and going into audio settings? So there's a little arrow just next to the microphone in the bottom left. And then if you just click it.
Is that better?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Hey.
Mr. Job, I'm just
Thanks
here. You might give me a job one day. Okay, so go on, Graham.
Yeah, so just building on what Andy, sorry about that, everybody. Just building on what Andy said there, I guess, across all of the different staff groups, we're also obviously looking at, things like recruitment approaches, career progression, career development. All of those things are under review for, when we're particularly looking at our work with Black, Asian, minority ethnic staff, but it's not just exclusive to that. So obviously all of those things will be considered, particularly around disability areas too. And I think a lot of the learning that we'll take out of our work with the BAME community will apply across the board to all staff groups and just really improve all our practice, around those key employment life cycle touch points, things like recruitment, induction, retention, development. So all of those are under review at the moment, councillors.
Just Councillor McKenna's question was around, are there any targets? And again, it's under review. When's the review going to be finished? I guess those are the two questions I think you'd probably want to push on a bit more.
So I'm working actively with our staff networks at the moment, and I'm looking to take some proposals around next steps in terms of all our inclusion work, probably July, August time, back to corporate leadership team. So we should be in a position over the summer months to bring more detail back to scrutiny.
Thank you. Councillor McKenna.
Oh, that's fine, Chair, and you did tidy up my point. I do think it's very important to have a target in mind when we're recruiting, and we've got something like 6% of under 25s. It's not good enough. I think the council employees should reflect the citizenship as a whole, and we're not doing that at the moment. So perhaps when it comes back, Graham, I will look forward to reading your report, and I will hopefully see that we have a target of maybe 10% of recruiting under 25s, and certainly in the area of disability, we need to move there as well.
Thank you, Councillor McKenna. Given Graham's here, we're going to move back to Councillor Firth's question a little bit earlier. Do you want to just re-outline it?
Was that about the carers, Councillor Scopes?
Yes, it was. But Councillor Firth, do you want to just clarify anything that was missed from Andy's response?
No, I was looking forward to that response, and then Jim has covered a topic that was going to be about my supplementary, which I'm happy to ask in a second.
Thank you.
So a number of things we are doing and will continue to do around supporting carers. Obviously, we'll look at reviewing and keeping in touch with all of our policy work and make sure they're offering proper support. We look at things like special leave. We've got lots of guidance for line managers about how they can better support carers. And we've introduced recently some confidential one-to-ones conversations for carers. And I think that's something that we're looking to do going forward, establish like a working carers passport. And I think there's some regional work taking place around that, where it's looking at all the issues that carers have, trying to make sure that line managers are effective at handling those and provide some support across the council for working age carers too. And there's a big push as well around carer ambassadors across the organisation. And we're really trying to push that aspect around allyship around working carers too. So there's just a few of the things that we're doing at the moment.
Councillor Firth.
Thank you for that, Graham. And it's just the reason why I was asking that question to start off with was obviously to lead on to, very similar to Councillor McKenna, about the situation where the starkest difference it looks to be is those that say that actually want to say on their survey that they have a disability or a condition that they'd like to declare. And the reason I wanted to raise that in particular, further to Councillor McKenna's point, is because I know it's been cheeky and talking about the next report, about working arrangements. But in that report, it states that almost 1 in 5, 18% of respondents to that said that they had a reasonable adjustment related to a disability, long-term health condition, non-visible impairment or mental health condition as a result in work. And the only reason I'm saying that is because of the fact that in comparison to 6%, it is a stark difference, whereas the 18% is only a percentage of the actual figure across the city from the census in 2011. Of 17% of residents saying they have a long-term health problem or disability. And I just wanted to make sure that whether there was anything particular that we need to be doing to whether, in fact, people feel confident if they need to say that they've got a disability or not, or whether, in fact, it's just something that's an anomaly within the data that's coming out.
Graham?
Should I take that up, Councillor Scopes? Yeah. Thanks for the question, Councillor. I think one of the first things I'd say is, and I'd need to check this, looking to make sure that our definitions of long-term impairment and disability in terms of sensitive information is the same as we're counting at council side. So I'll go away and check that in terms of comparison of those two figures. But we as Andy said previously, we have been doing lots as part of our return to work survey to ask staff about whether they have those reasonable adjustments in place. And you're right, 1 in 5 have come back and said they do, and they're where they've got arrangements in place already and have had. So in that sense, we're successful in managing any additional needs people have got, and what we need to do is make sure that as people return back to the workplace, that they're preserved, and the way we'll do that is through the one-to-one conversations that we'll have between all staff and their line managers over the coming weeks and months. It's a really important part of making sure that the arrangements that were in place prior to people working from home and as they come back are maintained. And we've been doing lots as well as part of our recent appraisal round to make sure that those really important wellbeing conversations take place. So between now and the end of July, everyone will be sitting down with the line manager having those conversations, and centre to that is this whole point around wellbeing, disability, reasonable adjustments, and making sure the right support's in place.
Thanks, Councillor Firth.
Thank you, Chair.
Good. Okay. And we'll move on to Councillor Hamilton.
It was Councillor Robinson before me, but I'll go. Jim has asked me, Councillor McKenna has asked my questions really, but regarding the BAME. However, on page 40, the third bullet point, where at the end it include working with the BAME network on specific issues raised. For example, what issues? I just think I just need a bit more information on some of the issues that I've raised. I have an idea. I could suggest certain things that I think might be, but I'd like to hear from the officers what certain specific issues they've raised there.
Okay, so I'm happy to answer that question. Maybe Graham will add. So I mentioned earlier, Councillor Hamilton, the race equality plan, which we've developed between officers and also the BAME staff network that you've rightly mentioned. That plan covers about sort of 45 different actions and issues in that plan. So it's very comprehensive, and it covers a whole range of different key issues, but predominantly are focused on issues connected to recruitment and selection, as Graham has mentioned. But also about career development, so making sure that training and development opportunities are open and available for everybody. One of the big challenges too is about progression, so progression of our BAME communities across and within the organisation. And there are also some very specific challenges too in terms of how we support our BAME colleagues whilst working in different teams and different services. So it's in terms of how we engage through things like appraisals, any kind of grievances or disciplinary issues. So making sure that whole employment relations situation works well. So that's pulled out and teased out in that race equality plan too. And there's quite a lot there about inclusion training and development. So it covers a lot of ground, and hopefully that quick summary helps, Councillor Hamilton.
Yes, it does. And can we have some feedback on some of those? Once you're going through, I know it's not going to be overnight, etc., but I'd like an update on some of them resolved and way forward, etc.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The plan does have key metrics attached to each of those action plans as reference, so we're certainly able to report back on that progress. That's absolutely fine, Councillor Hamilton.
And Councillor Hamilton, it's Graham again. Just to say, we've actually got something on the forward agenda for scrutiny to bring that plan back at a future date. So it's previously been here. We've had an initial discussion, but we recognise the importance of it, and it's back on the agenda in the coming month.
Just one more. I know this might not seem very important, but on page 54, with regards to the web, digital, online, and the development, it talks about the social media, and we've gone from what, 29,000 to 10 million. I just wanted to ask, how are we going to continue? I know we, at this moment in time, it's all about the pandemic, etc., and people are engaged and are using it. What's the plan going forward to keep the people still engaged in the Facebook posts? Because sometimes consultations are taking place, but they come out in bits and pieces. So I just want to know, is this going to be used to keep the public engaged? So not just pandemic at this moment, but other things that are coming up in the council. Is that what we're looking at going forward to keep the 10 million users?
Yeah, I'll answer that one for you, Councillor Hamilton. I will find out from colleagues in communications and marketing about their plans, and we can provide a response for you on that, if that's fine.
Thank you. Good. Thanks, Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a number of questions, some around gender pay gap and council tax collection, but I know Councillor Renshaw's wanted to come in, so I'll ask those later if that's okay. But I want to continue on the same theme, which was around the workforce and apprenticeships, because I think it is an important point. Could officers clarify around the apprenticeship levy? How much has been used towards apprenticeships and apprenticeships for the young in particular, and what's been used for MBAs for older staff who maybe fancy doing an MBA later in their career? How are we prioritising this? I understand that we'll have to think about career development and career progression, but how are we doing that? And are we targeting certain departments for the apprenticeship spending too? We know that highways have had some challenges recruiting staff, particularly who are skilled engineers. We're going to discuss digital as well, and it's really important that the council is embracing the digital agenda and is on the front foot, and we have staff that are digital savvy and aware and at the cutting edge. So there's a question around apprenticeships there that officers, I hope, can answer. The second is around the workforce and about better reflecting the city, which I think is point 3. Jim's question was about targets. There is a target that's set there, but there is no target around the young. Are these targets or aspirations? Because on that basis, the council has 61% of female staff, but 51% of the city are female. Are officers suggesting we're over-recruiting women in the council? Hopefully some of those questions could be answered.
Who wants to respond to that? Andy, looks like you'll start. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start. So, Councillor Robinson, if I cover apprenticeships first, as you raised that first, I think. Yeah, so there's quite a lot unpacked in that. And as you know, we've got around about 770 current live apprentices, and they're right across the different standards. So they're not just all skewed in one particular service or department, or equally at sort of apprenticeship higher level, sort of 6 or 7. The standards range from level 2 to 7, so they are quite diverse. So they're not just sort of front loaded. There is still a balance between those individuals that go through the apprenticeship standards who are current staff, and they may well be those leadership and management apprentices that you reference. But also we have about sort of 30-40% of those who are also new starters coming into the organisation that tend to be at that lower level, level 2 and level 3. They do tend to be blended, which I think is the right thing. And what we have tried to do is focus very much our effort on linking that to that recruitment that you've referenced. So when we were going through the voluntary severance scheme and when we were going through some of the recruitment activities sort of during the pandemic, we were trying to align our apprenticeship management to the service reviews, to the restructuring as well. So we're enabling services to think more creatively about using apprentices in different ways from perhaps the way that they had done previously. That also includes quite a significant increase in apprenticeships in the schools as well, because that's been a harder nut to crack, but that's moving in the right way as well. So there's quite a lot there, and also we've also developed some citywide apprenticeships too, working with the NHS and other organisations too. Again, supporting the health and social care system. So that again is trying to open it up and looking at those different apprenticeship standards rather than perhaps just for those who wish to do a management or a leadership qualification. So we are trying to broaden that range of different apprenticeship standards. So it's not just skewed in one particular area. Although, of course, we do support apprenticeships for those who are either aspiring leaders or equally those who are moving into management roles. A particular focus that we wish to do for the future of our apprenticeships at the moment is focusing or target some of our activity in particular areas. So we do want to support and target those who are care leavers, also those individuals who are living and working in priority neighbourhoods, and also the NEETs and women's groups as well. So we are trying to identify particular demographics and populations and use the apprenticeship, but also the T-level routes in to broaden that kind of engagement and attraction to that apprenticeship route. So we're very mindful about your particular issue about where the apprenticeships sit. Graham, is there anything you want to add to that?
just Chair, on the point about the staff workforce then and how that marries up against the target.
Oh yeah, sorry, Councillor Robinson. Yeah, you rightly mentioned just in terms of the demographic, in terms of male, female. I think, of course, the issue there is our target is about making sure that our workforce is representative of the communities that we serve, and that remains our target. I think inevitably the challenge that we've got, which is a long-standing challenge that we will continue to work on, is the different professions, the different services that we are operating, running right across the council. So, as you know, we've got large groups of staff, thousands of staff who are employed in civic enterprise Leeds, who are catering and cleaning staff predominantly. They traditionally are predominantly female, and hence that's why our demographic is notably higher. And what we really need to do is sort of challenge perhaps some of those stereotypes, again, open it up in terms of those other routes that I mentioned in terms of apprenticeships and different ways and means of recruiting staff. So our demographic is perhaps partly feature the types of services that we run rather than a particular aspiration or particular target.
I think it's just so we're clear on this, and I know Councillor Renshaw's wanted to come in as well. Once we say a target, the problem is we will assess against that target. And we will, and it can be a rather blunt instrument that gets used. I'm very keen, and I hope everybody would be, that we represent the city and that we move forward in that direction, but that we also have the best and the brightest working for the council too. And I would hate to think that we're chasing a target as opposed to trying to make sure that the council has the best staff, the most capable staff that are there. I suppose that's more of a point than a question for officers. So I'll pause there, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Renshaw, is your question on this topic or is it something else?
No, it's going back, Chair, to page 41 where it mentions mental health. And I've noticed the huge figures in mental health, and I wondered if that was any link to the pandemic or whether it was due to work pressure. There's a whole host of things that could be linked to. So I'd appreciate a breakdown of mental health, but is it just that the council are identifying more people who have got mental health issues? So if you can answer me that today, that'd be fine, but otherwise bring it back to another meeting.
I think if we can do some more analysis on that, Chair, that would be very useful. I think, generally speaking, what I would say is part of our work over the last year has been encouraging individuals to share with us if they are unwell due to mental health or stress or anxiety. So part of our challenge has been breaking down that stigma. So we are really encouraging individuals to share with us when they are suffering from mental ill health, where perhaps previously they've been reluctant or hesitant to do so. So we actually really understand what's happening in our workforce. So that will be part of the factor as to why we're reporting it a different way. And of course, a lot of our activity and response has been therefore our response to that. I think we probably have seen a bit of a COVID impact on that. So I think that probably will feature. And that's why we continue to push very much on the mental health first aid training. And we've got well over 800 of those people trained across the organisation. We will keep pushing that as a general strategy. But we will do some more analysis for you on that if that would help.
Yeah, because I think that there may be some long-term underlying pinning reasons as to why people have got mental health issues. But then some, like you say, will be linked to the pandemic. So it's identifying which and what, and is it just that we've become more aware and done more work on mental health? Thank you.
Thank you. Probably helpful in the first instance, Andy, if you give us a written answer to the board, and then we can decide whether to bring it back to a formal meeting. Okay, thank you, Councillor Renshaw. Okay, back to Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair, and I'll be brief because I know we want to move our agenda items on. Council tax collection is mentioned in there, and there's a fall in council tax collection that obviously has an impact on the council's finances. But I will be asking the board later as part of our work programme to look at council tax collection and how we can break those figures down so that we understand things on a ward basis. It would be really useful for members, I think, because we would then know where people are getting into trouble, how we can target that support, where we can direct them, and make sure that we're on the front foot with this. And if we are seeing trends as well, that some more localized data on that would be useful. The second is about the gender pay gap. The gap's got wider, it suggests from the report. I know Andy mentioned there about Civic Enterprise Leeds employing a large number of female staff, and previously the board has been told that has had an impact on the gender pay gap given the roles that they're occupied in. What new initiatives are the council taking forward to try and close the gender pay gap?
Councillor Scopes, would you like me to answer?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Robinson. So yeah, we do have a gender pay gap of about 6%. It is, we'll see that decrease, we hope, over the next 12 months. And as you rightly say, it is very dependent on the makeup of the services that we run and the populations within it, rather than inherent difference in the way that we pay. Some of the very specific activity that we are trying to do to squeeze or reduce that pay gap are focused on, I guess, two issues. First of all, trying to recruit staff from different populations, so we're less dependent on perhaps traditional neighbourhoods, the different workforces to move into those roles. And we talked earlier a bit about the use of apprenticeships and T-levels and the like. But also, I think the other factor which we'll see a difference, we hope, with the gender pay gap is about the progression and development of women across the organisation and through the different grades and different services that we run. So that's a big focus in terms of career support, mentoring that we're also issuing, a whole range of different development and training initiatives to encourage women to progress through their roles. And if we see a greater levels of progression, then the gender pay gap therefore should decrease as well. So it's about supporting individuals at the entry level, but also in terms of their career progression at the other end as well. So I think it does require both, and we have to focus on both. So it is a work in progress, but that's our general approach, general tactic, Councillor Robinson.
That's really useful. Thank you, Andy. And I think that I ask about this every time it comes up, the gender pay gap, where it's there. But I would be mindful and say this to anybody: you can't judge it as a snapshot in time. It is constantly working on this, and I know that HR colleagues take it very seriously. So that's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson. Just around the call centre, I know we talked about this briefly in Chair's brief, but I'm very keen to understand the total number of contacts, both by phone and by, I guess, internet contact numbers. Are those available? Tim, I don't know if you could comment.
Yes, we've got a meeting with Business Support Centre and Neil Evans later this week to discuss the sort of information that we want, the board might want, but would also welcome what information the board would like on the contact centre, because there is a wealth of information there, and what we want to do is focus on the really important bits that you think would add benefit. So we will be meeting later this week to chat about that.
Yeah, and I think one of the key points around how many people contact the council, how quickly the issues get dealt with, how long they wait for. But I guess from my perspective, I want more than just the average time. I'm interested in like the standard deviation or the 95% competence interval to make sure we get some sort of measure of how varied it is, how long you wait for the answer to be called, how many people drop off, how possible it is to use your online equivalent, and is that straightforward? So I know there's some things where you need to make sure you don't need to process for recording or reporting a pothole. Doesn't mean you need to put in all your personal details, because it's just, you just need a photo and a location, don't you? So it's just making sure those processes as well. So but I'll leave that with you, and hopefully you can come back to us. Councillor Cooper Timely, I was hoping you might want to comment on anything that's been discussed on this item.
Yeah, just to really welcome Scrutiny board members' comments on the HR and the workforce issues. As you know, I've just recently taken over the resources portfolio on executive board, so I'll certainly be picking those up going forward as well. I just wanted to make a comment, Councillor Scopes, on the issues you raised around the contact centre. And as you know, the contact centre has recently moved from the Communities Directorate across to the Resources and Corporate Directorate under Neil Evans, and there's currently a review being undertaken on the contact centre and its performance and potentially ways of improving those going forward, how they may be, taken forward. So I would suggest an update on the work that's been that's happened so far. Maybe for Scrutiny, it would be worth your while at a future meeting. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I was just trying to let you know, as I know from my previous portfolio.
Yeah, good. Good. You can't get away from it, I'm afraid, Councillor Cooper. No, that's good. We would welcome a report, I think, on that, and I think it's something that people perceive as the first, I guess, touching point they have with the council. So their experience on that really affects how they feel about the whole council. So it's really, really important. Tim, do you want to come in?
That's right. Just to add on the calls, I'm currently scoping up a piece of work where we're going to look at how the calls are prioritised to make sure that the right calls are sort of reacted to and the right resources and technology are placed on the calls of most importance. So it's like a risk-based piece of work that we're going to do at the end of this month. But am I right in thinking that there's a specific report on the call centre due to come to the board in September?
Is that right, Rob?
Yes, Tim. Yeah, so it's slated for September. I'll contact you outside the meeting and try and link into what you've just been discussing now. Thank you. Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Okay. I can't see anyone else indicating, so unless Councillor Harland wants to make any comments as an executive member on this item.
No, excuse me. No. It's Councillor Cooper alluded to. I too have just recently taken over from the communities portfolio, but no, nothing to add at this stage.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you very much for that report. I thought that was a very helpful discussion, and also we will be looking at this again. There's a few things that need following up, which I'm sure Rob will email people about, and a few things that will come back to future meetings, which I think are very important. Okay. So let's move on to agenda item 6, and I think this is Graham. If you just assume that members have read it, but draw out anything you think is particularly important.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Scone. Yeah, hi everyone. This is an update around future working arrangements at the council, and over the past few months, rightly, we've been focused on the return to workplace, particularly of those that have been working from home during COVID. But remember that this is more than just a COVID issue. It's about a long-term change to working practices at the council. And it's not just about office staff, because as a council, we've made a pledge to all staff, frontline, outdoor, depot-based workers, to improve their work environment too. And all teams, we've been asked to pull together some plans around that for 2021. But as you know, lots been happening over the last couple of months, particularly in terms of planning and engagement in relation to the people who are working from home, in anticipation of relaxation of the government's work from home instruction and social distance measures. And we now know that 19th of July is the date that the government's working towards for this. And that in the meantime, the work from home instruction will still apply. Over the last, since we last talked, I think in March, we've sought the views of all of our staff who are working from home through a new survey, and they've told us what their future working preferences are beyond social distancing restrictions. and clear support there for continued homework and going forwards. We've also set out some corporate principles in that time around our expectations for future work and how we'll approach that. And remember, we're trying to balance three things here: the preferences staff have, the service needs around delivery and what our customers need, and importantly, what the council can provide in terms of building and resources. So chief officers have been tasked with developing those service expectations over the last few weeks at local level. I think it's important to remember there's no one size fits all here. It's going to be different in different teams. But the right conversations are happening on a local level through chief officers with some corporate guidance and a toolkit we've created. So lots been happening in terms of engagement. You can see in the report some detailed information about the feedback that's coming back from staff in terms of their preferences. So I'm not going to go through that now because I guess you've had a chance to look at that. Other than to say, there's still that strong appetite for working from home for lots of people. Pleasingly, it looks like people are now more comfortable and feel more effective working from home 12 months on through COVID, which is great to see. But we know that there are still a whole range of feelings out there from people in terms of a return to the workplace, and whether that be anxieties around their own health, public transport use, just being back in the office with more people. We know we need to manage that sensitively. So whilst we've got the broad results from the staff survey, really important to mention it before earlier on the call, that one-to-one conversations taking place now with all staff to make sure that their personal working arrangements for the future are mapped out. The ongoing work that chief officers have done around service planning has produced some positive feedback in the sense that chief officers feel that they will be able to successfully balance the staff preferences versus service needs versus corporate resource conundrum. And as a programme team, it's probably just worth mentioning and remembering that we're still working on our long-term change programme supporting all of this work. So still remodelling a small number of pilot buildings as testing sites, still working through the booking system, around how people will use that when they do return to work. A review of our IT infrastructure is ongoing, especially around the hybrid meeting rooms and all the audio and conferencing kits we have. And once again, I think importantly, it came up on the call today, didn't it, in many different guises, that support to people who can't work from home or have some form of reasonable adjustment. We're actively following that through, as we have been throughout COVID. We sent a comms out to all of our staff on Friday of last week, which said that we were going to continue to follow government advice on COVID secure measures, and we'll see over the coming weeks, how that situation develops. But do feel believe it's sensible that as things progress, that we do take a phased transition back into the workplace for those people who've been working from home. So we used the summer to reconnect. It's a big step. We know that for our teams, our services, and for individuals in terms of new working patterns being established. And we want to recognise, some of the ongoing anxieties that staff still have. So rather than a set date for a return, imagine it more as a phased reintroduction back into the workplace. And obviously what we need to do as well is make sure that all of our remodelling around our buildings, the IT kit and infrastructure, we test that out. We'll be learning on the way. And I think over the next few months, we'll be making sure that there's lots of chances for get-togethers and taster days for staff to try out some of these new arrangements too. So we've done lots of thinking, lots of planning, and we're ready and prepared, to gear up as social distancing measures relax in the near future.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, move on to questions if that's okay. Start with Councillor Carlisle.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Graham, for that, because it's a really difficult one, really, isn't it? been thrown into a way of working that we were maybe progressing to, but then had to deal with it afterwards rather than do the planning before. So I do appreciate all the work that's gone in on this. I wanted to pick up a couple, I guess I'm reversing the lines of inquiry I was asking over the previous year, really, because there's the outlying figures in some of the survey data that you've got that I want to pick up. Some of them you've touched on. So when we talk about people coming back into the office, 30% say they're unhappy with that, and that's obviously some of that will be that some people just enjoy working from home and are enjoying that environment and not having to come in. But there will be those that just do not feel comfortable at the moment with, as you say, those wider things. It may not be coming into the office as such, but it may be commuting, going to the city centre if they happen to work in the city centre environment, etc. And that then is a difficult position to be in, to support those who aren't comfortable to come back into the office when many of their colleagues may come straight back in. If their colleagues are having a team meeting and somebody feels uncomfortable to come in for that, then that's something I think we're really going to need to support and try and help with. On the kind of contrast to that, when we look at people's preferences for the future, we've got 80% of people who'd prefer at least half of the time from home, but we didn't really have a figure there in terms of how many people would like to be in the office every day. So those people who are struggling maybe working from home, but there's a couple of ways around that, because one of the real difficulties with the team we've got and people's preferences on this is you may find that of your team of close people you work with, some would prefer to work from home, some would prefer to work from the office. Some of the difficulties may be people having online meetings rather than face-to-face meetings, but obviously if we've got some from home and some in the office, regardless of whether you're in the office, you're still going to be doing quite a lot of meetings in that online or hybrid environment. So I was just wondering how we're going to tackle that. So that issue where among a team, should we say, some people are very eager to come straight back into the office, return to face-to-face work because they find it incredibly difficult to do it online. Some people may be incredibly reticent to be in that team environment. And also, if you are coming in, just to add to that, if you're the only person in your team that happens to be coming in the office because you don't have a suitable working environment at home and you're there every day, you don't really have that support network you may have had before. You know, that your other colleagues aren't necessarily there around you just to have a chat to on your way into work and such. So I just wondered if there was more, a bit more detail on that. Really, it may be that that's something that needs to come up later, but it's an incredibly difficult balance to strike, isn't it? I have much sympathy for you, and just wondered how that kind of hybrid teams were looking at working and how we could support people in the best way.
Lots in there, Councillor. Thanks for the question. And you're right, there's an awful lot to consider here, isn't it? And I'll try and pick up a few of those points just in turn. So in terms of the number of people that have needed to come into the workplace throughout COVID, the numbers, they're roughly have been around somewhere between 600, 800 people. We've effectively supported to remain in the workplace throughout COVID and COVID-safe work environments. So that's been for a number of reasons. People's well-being, productivity, home situation hasn't allowed them to work from home, and they've always been supported and always will be. And then in answer to some of the other, difficult and sensitive arrangements around getting people back in the team situation, I don't think there's a one size fits all answer corporately that we can give around that, and we've really been working with our teams and our chief officers and staff over the last couple of months to really impress the importance of having the one-to-one conversations. Everyone's different, all teams are different, and we really need to make sure that those happen. And you'll see in the corporate principles that we've laid out that we have started to set out some of the core organisational wide council principles, and there's things in there like suggesting that people will come in, everyone will come into the workplace and spend time with their team, and that's I think it's a reasonable ask in terms of whether somebody wants to stay at home and that's their personal preference, they've still got a commitment to team colleagues, in terms of contact, collaboration, development time, support, and some of that important stuff around people not feeling isolated. Well, part of teams coming in is to provide that team collaboration and support, but also we know that sometimes being together as teams is really important to help teams function, and we will need and want to come together from face to face from time to time. So we do want people to come into the workplace, but you're right also that the majority of our working time may increasingly be spent in that hybrid working environment, and that's why it becomes really important then to get that right. And the DIS team, I don't know whether colleagues are on the call today, they're doing a review of that whole all the kit that supports that and all the systems that support that. So that's one thing. But equally, we'll be invested more in training around how, for example, how you chair a hybrid meeting successfully to make sure everyone's included. So there's probably some new approaches we need to take for managers, particularly to manage some of these team environments in different and more conscious ways. So there'll be lots of training coming online. There's that review of all the kit, but importantly, I think one of the reasons we want that time phase transition period back in is to enable some of these conversations to happen and happen well, so that people don't feel forced into a place where they're not comfortable, where there's that uncertainty or anxiety. So we know some people are chomping at the bit to get back into the workplace too, and as soon as restrictions allow, we'll make sure that happens and people can come in and get back in the workplace, back to city centre and some of the district centres, and start working with teams again.
Thank you, Graham. Bev, I can see your hands up. Can you pick this up in terms of the hybrid meetings in your agenda item next? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, no problem.
Yeah, just because we've got that agenda item, otherwise we'll cover it twice probably. In terms of Councillor Carlyle's question, I think there's also a really important point about young people again, and particularly more junior younger people, and making sure they get enough of the softer contacts with people, and making sure they have those environments that helps them develop. And I think that's a really important aspect that we need to make sure we pick up on. But I've made that point before, so you don't need to comment. Just want to keep saying it so you hear it, Graham. That's all right. Okay, I'm going to bring in Councillor. I don't know who put your hand up first out of Councillor Firth and Robinson. Okay, Councillor Robinson.
Age before beauty. Thanks, Sam. So I guess there's some points that relate onto the next item, and thinking about digital infrastructure keeping up with the pace of these plans, and skills as well, the jobs in DIS to support this going forward. So I hope that those can be addressed under the next item, but particularly for HR colleagues on this, the Centre for Cities recently had a report that said we would be back to the 5-day office week again within 2 years. How does that impact on your plans? And the second question, given that more people are working from home, and we saw in the last report that accidents and injuries fell, if somebody electrocutes themselves on the monitor, is that claiming on their home insurance, or is that a workplace accident? How does that work?
So in terms of, oh, go on, Andy.
So I was just happy to answer Councillor Robinson's issue just in terms of the health and safety aspects of people working in different environments, whether it's at home or somewhere else, third location or the office. I think the key issue there is just to make sure that wherever individuals are working, that we've done whatever we can to provide support and guidance so they can set up their workplace to be safe. And as colleagues will know, we do have the health and safety inquiry line. We're doing the callbacks to making sure that people can check and balance that. I think in your scenario where that individual is suffers ill health because of something, then as always there would have to be a necessary investigation and the decision as to where our duty of care sits and are we culpable or not. Probably in most cases, I don't think we would be as an employer, because individual is at home and not in the workplace. I think as long as the kit that we're provided is safe, and we've done all of that kind of support that I mentioned in terms of the online guidance, the training, the individuals do that self-assessment test to make sure that they've set up their own working environment appropriately, then ordinarily we it should be a safe and reasonable working place. So the risk to us is obviously limited, but obviously we want to keep making sure that people have that support, advice and guidance to set up their own working their workplace in that self and in that appropriate way. So it's something that we'll keep pushing on, Councillor Robinson, but there's an element of risk there, but I have to say I think it's probably very low, because we can't be culpable of people are living and working in their own homes. That's their issue as much as it is ours.
If you burn yourself on the kettle making a brew, it's not the council's fault.
Absolutely. That's
right,
I guess
okay.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
That's fine. And on the 5-day office week, then.
So in terms of that, there's obviously lots of different views, Councillor, in terms of what the future looks like. You've talked there about some feeling that this is just a temporary blip and we're back to 5 days a week in the office. Conversely, you see things over the weekend around, the right to request fresh homework and how that's potentially going to find its way through into some legal mandate. So there's lots of different views and different sectors and different organisations are taking their own stance on this. And I guess what we've done is set out our corporate principles, in terms of the long-term future, which indicates that we feel that when you think about staff preferences, but also about, organisationally where we want to be to, that home working deserves to stay, and we'll keep that for the foreseeable future. But also that one of the things that we've said is that, as you'd expect, we'll always keep this under regular review, and whether that's as an individual, team, service, council, we're learning as we go here, all of us together on some of this, and I think reserving that right to change what we do, based on whether we see things and how successful they are, is really important. So we've put something together which we think is meeting the staff preferences, and their desire for future work. And we've done that important check around with chief officers around, do we think we can deliver this new way of working and then service delivery be maintained and improved. They're confident we can do that, but like with everything, I think we'll say let's keep it under constant review and keep talking to you about whether things do need to or can change in the future.
Thank you. Mark, are you wanting to come in on this point as well?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Scholes. Yes, in response to Councillor the question, I suppose, about the 5-day office week, and I suppose just thinking around the estate and the flexibility of the estate. One of the things that, as Graham says, we have to constantly review where we're moving to, but as the report sets out, we are making assumptions about reducing the size of the estate, as we've talked about at this scrutiny board previously. And I think one of the key things that we will be looking at as part of us doing that work is how we improve the utilisation of the buildings that we have, but importantly, how we can make sure that those buildings are as flexible as possible, so that, as the report says, there's assumptions already being made around 50% of staff being able to take space in those buildings. Well, actually, through some of that remodeling work, we can actually increase the capacity of those buildings. I think we won't have a one-size-fits-all. Some services will require more collaboration space. Some services may require more desk space. But actually, if we can get the flexibility and using that booking system, so that the staff can take advantage of the different types of accommodation, then you know, while we might have to remodel again and continually update the estate in the future, I think we can probably start to accommodate the broad needs of staff, and you know, whether it's a 3-day, 5-day, 1 day a week in the office. I think it's just learning from that, and then making sure links across with colleagues in DIS as well, that the right equipment is there, both in terms of desks, tables, chairs, sofas, whatever it might look like, but also the right IT kit.
Thank you, Mark. I've seen your hands down, Councillor Robinson, so I assume you don't have anything further. Okay, thank you. Councillor Firth.
Thank you very much, Chair. And it's really interesting to have this discussion again, because obviously we've been discussing this over a number of months, and it's especially prevalent at this moment in time. I do have a concern about, it is fantastic that we consult our staff to ask their opinion, but it is about what are the priorities for the council and what it's delivering for the residents as well. And I think that has to be emphasised when that is taken into this strategy. For example, if you look at the figures, you could say, well, more than half of staff, 51%, would prefer to work from home most or all of the time, but actually 55% would like to spend time in the office every week or most weeks. And so it's certainly how you can look at the figures to then determine what we want to look at. And I have one concern that I would like to be answered, which was raised in a debate on a news channel debate in the last few days in relation to staff progression. Obviously, there has been a year whereby staff appraisals have not been taking place in the frequency and the ability that they have been in the past. And we obviously don't want to hold back our staff from progressing through the council, because potentially we may lose them altogether if they feel that potentially they're not getting the opportunities that are available to them. And as Councillor McKenna raised earlier about the situation about trying to recruit those either on apprenticeships or between 16 to 24, is that trying to attract them into an environment whereby they're going to know that they're going to be valued in their work. And my concern is that we don't emphasise enough potentially the amount of emphasis that working in the office has, either from learning from your colleagues, learning from being able to do things hands-on, or more generally being in the workplace. I just wanted to ask, what is the strategy going forward in HR to make sure that we don't limit the progression of individuals by not having that work office environment as much as possible? And further to Councillor Robinson's point, to return to as soon as possible to some sort of normality to ensure that they are not losing out. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Graham, I'll let you tackle that.
Thanks, Cal. And I think you've raised some really important points there that we are working on at the moment. And I think what you say around being really conscious of how this new way of working has impacted on all different walks of our working life, an important one there being progression. Well, one of the things, Councillor Scopes mentioned earlier on, people early in their careers, should they be spending more time in the workplace in order to get that important support, that mentor type arm around them, the ability to learn from teams? Well, I think yes, we should be doing that, and that's one of the things we'd like to see the local teams adopt. And I think what we're all really keen to do is re-establish new ways of working where we don't end up with two-track workforce, where being in the workplace versus being at home does alter your or disadvantage you in any way in terms of your everyday working experience, and also important things like progression and opportunity. And I think we are going to have to work on those collectively as teams. I think new issues will arise. People have concerns about being out of sight and out of mind and how that will work, if somebody purely works from home. And I think that's one of the really important aspects of what's happening at the moment, is we need to redefine the purpose of coming into the workplace and the very nature of what that's for. We know that people don't want to come in just to sit at a desk largely. It is about doing some of that team development work, team contact, team collaboration. And all of those things, I think, are really important that we preserve those, because they're really, really crucial in terms of teams being effective and being able to high perform, and individuals too. So I guess the answer is that locally teams are trying to rebalance that and come up with some new working patterns that balance all of those things. And you're right in what you said. You're right at the start of your piece there about how service delivery and customer needs to be right at the top of the agenda. And that's exactly what the chief officers have been doing over the last 6 to 8 weeks, doing their thinking to make sure that whatever happens around future work, and that those service delivery outcomes and priorities and performance doesn't suffer in any shape or form. And as you can see, they're confident that they can do that. In terms of, have I currently got the detailed plans around what that looks like, and could I share that with you now? No, we'll probably need to work them up together, and it'll be different, for different teams. But I think the ownership around that and the accountability around that sits locally with teams, and as we know, over COVID, the people right across council teams have carried on delivering and done a fantastic job. So we know that teams have been able to work well together, and we know that from the survey too, more people are feeling like they can work at home better. But yeah, you're right. Those important points you raise about being together for team development, progression, learning. We need to make sure they're properly factored in to the way we work going forward. And I guess that's one of the things over the next 2 or 3 months corporately we'll need to check as happening properly. And then probably also we can send some good reminders of things like new induction arrangements, team working arrangements, where we can make sure that people get the support they need, but are also held to account around some of that stuff too.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Cooper, yeah, you can just to see if Councillor Cooper wants to come at this point, and then you can definitely ask a supplementary question, Councillor Firth.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Scopes. Appreciate you letting me come in at this point. I suppose I just wanted to say that we're still in an evolving situation. We're not in a stable position yet as a country. Never mind as a city. We've just had the restrictions. It should have been today that the country opened up for the last time, but it's had to be reconsidered and moved on for a further 4 weeks, just to try and ensure that everybody keeps safe during this very difficult time. And I think as a council, what we're trying to do is to evolve and balance as we go forward, but we're not in a stable position enough to be able to say exactly what's going to happen in detailed terms as we go forward. But, from your questions as a scrutiny board, I feel assured somewhat that you'll be monitoring things going forward. And I'm really pleased about that, that you are really concerned about our workforce and everybody that works for the council. I think I really want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who works for the council for what they've done during this really challenging time of over the pandemic. To go from a standing start to where we are now is really amazing. And it's everybody has done their part to ensure that we've been able to continue to deliver frontline services and still have the back office function available to ensure that everything's carried on as near to normal as it possibly could. I just want to make sure that my thanks are recorded to every single person that's worked for Leeds City Council over that period of time. And I'd just ask Scrutiny Board to remember that it is an evolving situation that we're in. But please, rest assured that we will have that fine balance that you've talked about, between working from home, coming into the office, and everybody having the opportunity that they need to progress in their career or to do their role. And also throughout that actually the citizens and the residents of Leeds get the right service that they deserve as well. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Councillor Firth.
Thank you very much. And adding to Councillor Cooper's point, and also thank you very much for the comments that came before. I think that the main question I want to add into that is the fact that what Councillor Renshaw raised earlier, which is that the major area that has sickness now is mental health, and that's obviously risen significantly over the past year. And unfortunately, it's very easy to hide all of our troubles as we sit behind a screen rather than actually being face to face with somebody in the office. And I'm sure we all at some point would love to be back in the office to make sure that actually we not only have that support, but actually we then feel that we have somebody looking out for us. And I'm sure that other colleagues, potentially either union representatives within the council or otherwise, may feel that that's absolutely what we need to ensure that people are looked after, especially working for Leeds City Council. So the one thing I wanted to ask was particularly in relation to looking forward. We've got a situation now where, yes, restrictions are being extended. So do we have, as Councillor Robinson said, any view to potentially how we're going to ensure that those members of staff that potentially are feeling that I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I apologise. I'll have to come back, Councillor Scopes. I've lost it. My general question was basically that if we have a situation whereby staff feel that they are unable to be right, effectively, around 6 months ago, over 60% of staff wanted to work from home. It is now just over 50%. And that shows that there has been a decline in the amount of people that potentially want to work from home. And is that being taken into consideration? Thank you, Chair.
Graham? It has.
Well, just on that figure, Councillor, when we did the survey around work from home in June last year and the one this time round, the appetite for home working was largely the same. So what we've seen is 80% of people say that they want to spend at least half their week working from home, and the picture in May this year or April compared to June last year is pretty much identical. So that appetite's still there, and in terms of the support we've provided to people either in the past or going forward, just to reiterate some of the stuff that Andy mentioned earlier, we've done numerous wellbeing surveys where we've provided hundreds of people with one-to-one phone calls to follow up on their support needs. So if somebody was really struggling, there was an outlet there for them. We've pushed really hard to make sure that the manager contact is ever present, and we know that largely, not perfectly, but largely, 90-95% of people say they get the contact from the managers they need, which is great to see. But you're right, every one person who's out there feels unsupported is one too many. So we'll continue to push until we're confident that everyone's getting the support they need. And I think that's through things like our appraisal conversations, the regular contact, by sitting down and really understanding people's anxieties and fears or challenges around future work, and all of those things we're doing. And we'll continue to do to make sure that we try and pick up everybody who needs that additional help, whether that's mental health, disability, questions around career progression. I think all of those things are rooted in regular, ongoing, value-based conversations with the managers and team.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Firth?
No, that's it from me. Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks, Councillor Firth. I think actually in terms of noting Councillor Cooper's point about an evolving situation, I think it's worth saying that over the next coming months and years, sort of codifying some of this stuff will be helpful. And I know it will be evolving certainly at the moment, but when you think about like team managers may need to come in more than someone else to meet their team, that sort of thing is the sort of thing we can probably write down and start thinking about more clearly. But I do accept the point that codifying now before we know what the reality is actually like is quite difficult. But it's worth having those things in mind. I just put that as a comment rather than as a question. At the moment, I can't see anyone else wanting to comment. I don't know, Councillor Cooper, if you have any other words you want to say at this point before we close the item.
No, I think I made my comments, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, okay, so we'll move on to item 7 now with Bev and Leonardo. I just remind you, I think there's 2 points from the last item that we'd like you just to make sure you highlight in terms of plans for hybrid meetings and how those will work, and 2 around keeping pace, the technology keeping pace with the changes we're seeing with our staff. I guess I'd again highlight that if you introduce yourself before you start talking, and also assume we've read the report rather than going through what's written down. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Actually, I should say good afternoon, 5 minutes after 12. All right. So my name is Leonardo Tantari. I'm the Chief Digital Information Officer for Leeds City Council, and I'm joined by Bev, who is the Deputy Chief Digital Information Officer. Okay, so I'm assuming that you read the report, as Councillor Scope had just mentioned. So let me highlight only a few things that through the report. So as you can see, we set the vision and mission that we have brought into the team in terms of delivering those services for the city, the council, the CCG, our citizen, etc. And it is connected to also the point that Councillor Scopa was mentioning a moment ago in terms of using leading edge technology. So that is highlighted in the report. The other big point is that we are combining a number of things together with all together as part of the new integrated digital services team moving forward. So just to recognize that it's not only the council, but it's also the digital team in the CCG, and also the digital team which was looking after a city related project or city specific projects. And we will be doing that in a shared services model where we have a team which will deliver services overall for the city and various organizations. That, of course, is to the benefit of our citizens and colleagues. The report highlights work which we have been doing on the digital roadmaps for a number of reasons, particularly to improve our digitalization of council, CCG, etc., but also to enhance our digital skills as well of our colleagues and citizens. We have a number of technology changes that which are underway. We have highlighted in the report the principle of cloud first, but it also is a principle of mobile first as well. And within that, we want to highlight services moving to online, so that will provide different use cases that will help interactivity with our citizens and colleagues. And that is also related to the point of working remotely, because more applications that move to online, more applications which are hosted on the cloud will mean that people can use those applications more applications from smartphones, tablets and things like that, which will enhance, of course, the interactivity, but also will enable that hybrid ways of working wherever we need for our citizen colleagues. We have highlighted work which we are doing on 365, which will bring some of the benefits also to the contact centers, which we have highlighted in previous conversations. So I thought to mention that as well. As well, we have mentioned in the report that we are moving to a different technology called Drupal for our websites. The reason of highlighting the technology, because it will see the replacement of our website, but also it will see new technology coming in, more chat online, so perhaps the establishment of a community online, and therefore hopefully some work redirected from our contact center to the website and to more online, which again will enable a more digital and more online experience. So that's why we have highlighted that. Part of the vision of DIS is also rationalize our application landscape. So I just wanted to mention that because we have a large estate in the council. We have more than 600 live application with almost 2,000 access databases. So it's a large estate, and that is only growing. So it is part definitely of our vision to rationalize and simplify our estate to give a better service to colleagues, citizens. And as part of that, we will be reviewing, of course, our devices and the use of devices moving forward. The report focuses also on the work that our information governance team continue working on, such as, for example, from a compliance perspective, the work on certification for PCI, which is well underway. We are looking at establishing a security operations center, possibly not just only for Leeds, but also in collaboration with some of the other council as well. So that is something that we'll see the centralization of the function which looks after the monitoring and security of our technology landscape and respond to cyber security incidents. So I thought that is a good point to mention. There are other things the report focus on, like more efficiency and more robust triaging of, for example, statutory request, which is ongoing through our information governance team as well. A lot of the work which is undertaken at the moment in reviewing the data storage. As part of Microsoft 365, we are moving our storage to online, and as you appreciate, that is a large undertaking and it requires the right focus when it comes to security and information governance. Part of the digital strategy is also to establish an Office of Data Analytics, which will see, yes, the creation of a new city data platform online, on the cloud, again, to follow the previous principle mentioned, but also we'll see a new team which work in collaboration between councils, CCG, and other health partners, including university. So we have ongoing conversation with the hospital, with community health, mental trust organization, third parties, or third sector as well. So we'll see, we are on the path of forming that team that will provide the analytical services to have organization are part of that Office of Data Analytics. Part of also our agenda and vision is to digitize more the council and organization which work in collaboration with the council. So therefore, digitalization is a big topic for the team, which includes different ways of working and changing the processes as well. So on things that perhaps we were used to do in a certain ways, they will change with the utilization of technology more online, whether that things which will include, for example, artificial intelligence. So just to give you an example, we are looking at unattended chatbots to answer queries on websites. So that's part of digitizing. We will maintain always a user-centered design approach and principle, because that is the key of anything we build. That is the key of providing the right experience to user and citizen. We will focus on becoming more agile, and that includes also the approach of building things more iteratively, incrementally. So that is there. That is why the report mentioned that. As well, we will continue to follow on digital standards from the government. So, and the focus is more than ever on increasing our citizen and colleague skills. And we have, as you know, a 100% digital team, which has been doing fantastic work in the recent months and will continue to do that. And that is something which has also been discussed through the establishment of the ICP in the healthcare space. Couple of other things moving towards the conclusion of just of the report in terms of giving you a quick update. We have established a number of governance forums. So we have a design authority which reviewed diligently the design of every business case, every project, every solution that is put forward for delivery. And we have a forum which now review prioritization, resource allocation. We also had a forum which will continue to work on reviewing business cases for a digital portfolio. And we are about to establish also a digital board, which will review ahead of business cases coming into DIS. So we'll review those cases in light of the benefits they need to bring, and also in light of the digital roadmaps, which each directorate or line of business, particularly in the council, is following. So a lot of work on that. It goes without saying that we have a large number of projects in the digital team. We have established a prioritization, so a way to prioritize project and to categorize project into 4 different categories that has been shared with our corporate leadership team. And it's fair to say that there is more work that is done, that needs to be done, and that way of prioritization project will be extended to the CCG as well, and also to the CT related projects as well. I would say that from a resource and capacity perspective, that exercise has highlighted that we are overutilized quite significantly, and that is a conversation that we are bringing to our corporate leadership team, because out of a team of around 500 people, we have roughly around almost 300 people which are working on keeping the lights on. So the available capacity which needs to be dedicated to digitizing services and working on a new project is limited. So the total number of FTE is not reflective of the reality of the resource capacity that we have available. The report also gives you an idea, without going through role by role, of some of the resource types where we have constraints. So which is important, and is constraints about having enough FTE in the team to do the work, but also it is constrained on finding those resources as well in the market. We have a dashboard reporting which goes out now on a monthly basis. So in terms of enhancing the transparency on what the team is working on, there are a lot of activities on the workforce planning perspective, bringing new technology like 365, cloud, Azure, sub-NASes, etc. means we need to retrain our staff. So that will be a focus for us, but it will bring challenges as well in terms of market rates, and also using contractors from an agency perspective. We have committed through conversation with the unions not to keep contractors for longer than 2 years, but based on the current level of the skills and the user technology that we need to enhance, it's difficult to see a scenario where we don't use contractors. So I mentioned already a little bit about capacity, but I just wanted to mention that we work also with a number of partners where we use additional capacity, or we can bring in more capacity, for example, through contractors or agency workers. But we're also looking in the future to bring an additional type of service, more a body shop type of service. So we're looking at other options as well to increase on demand the capacity of the team. We are reviewing the SLT structure. This is currently ongoing, so that's part of workforce planning. We are combining the teams which I mentioned earlier. There are no TUP or contract changes involved, so just to give you reassurance on that. And we are also still on the way of implementing the DIS structural changes as part of the Council financial challenges, which were previously announced. We have activities on the equality front, which are ongoing and will continue to work. For example, the listening sessions with BAME staff members, so that will continue, and we will bring more focus to that. As well, we will continue on the trainee development scheme, the student placement, and also the apprentices. So in relation to the earlier questions about hybrid meetings, we have been looking at additional technology to bring in to enhance the experience, precisely for the point that you mentioned earlier on, in terms of having colleagues which will continue to work from home, as well colleagues which will be at the office as well. And I will see a new type of technology which will be installed in different meetings, in different meeting rooms. As part of that, we have also confirmed that we will continue and we will support Microsoft Teams and Zooms as well. I don't know if you want to add anything else, Bev, specifically on the hybrid part, because you've been following closely the project.
Yeah, absolutely. Afternoon, everybody. So in terms of the hybrid, I mean, I think all the points that were raised earlier on about people being in the office and then ending up spending all their time in hybrid meetings are really, really valid ones. So I think what we're trying to do from a technology point of view is make sure the technology is available to support people to work in a different way when it's appropriate. And I think that's probably one of the key points. But in terms of the experience of people, one of the things we were very conscious of, first of all, the solution that you have as members in committee room 6 and 7 is different actually to what officers are using in most of the meeting rooms, and it's certainly not as immersive as the kit that you have in room 6 and 7. So what we wanted to look at was coming up with some new bits of kit to try out in some of our meeting rooms initially to make sure that it works better. And the previous experience was that you had a fixed screen at the end of the room with one camera on it, and some microphones that were then sort of spread across the table with lots of cables trailing everywhere. And what you didn't get is if you were remote, you were just looking down a long table with lots of people sort of side to side. Sometimes the sound quality wasn't great, and certainly that visual look at being able to see who was speaking in the room wasn't ideal. So the kit that we're going to be trying out does swivel round to sort of track the people within the room, and also the microphone solutions are, we have been told, much improved. So we're due to install some of that kit within, I think, the area within Merion up on the 10th floor, and certainly within the chief exec's area initially, and that should be happening within the next 2 to 3 weeks ahead of people coming back into the office. But we do need to sort of make sure that that is the right solution, because clearly we won't want to commit a lot of expenditure to something that we're not convinced is the right solution going forward. As soon as we're happy with that and we've got feedback from pilot users, then yes, there would be a plan to then replace the equipment that's within the rest of the meeting rooms where that's appropriate. But in addition to that, we've also got a piece of work for all the existing kit to make sure that that switches onto Teams. At the moment, it's still linked to Skype meetings, so connecting to a team meetings is a little bit convoluted. And we also need to make sure that we give everybody the appropriate training and guidance, that it is something that's very intuitive for them to sort of go into a room and it just works. That's what it needs to do. But so the technology will be there. It'll take us a little time, as Graham alluded to earlier on, about rolling that out as we get new buildings. But we do need to make sure everybody understands how to use it. And then we pick that we're using it for the right things, because certainly we've had lots of feedback from staff, and I'm sure you are exactly the same, is when you've spent all day in hybrid meetings, you don't move around. You know, if you're like me and you've got earphones on, your ears are burning at the end of the day. So what we don't want is everybody coming into the office and just doing those same things. I think it's about coming into the office and using that time to have, you know, face-to-face conversations where you can really sort of see people and have those sort of, you know, side-by-side chats as you're getting on with things. And, you know, and genuinely, you know, running workshops, that type of environment is probably more what we would envisage people would be doing in the office. But we certainly don't want to exclude those people who don't want to come in from having that option to connect in as well.
Thank you very much, Bev. So I stop there. Are there any questions?
Oh, yeah, thanks, Leonardo. Just on the other point that's raised about keeping pace, I think what I'm hearing is it's going to be a challenge because of the resources. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair. And we have a planned conversation next week where I will show the resource profiles and how it is utilized in the team. So what effectively 500 people are doing on a day-to-day basis, how many projects we have, what type of resources we are struggling with, etc. As I already mentioned to some colleagues in the CLT team, there is a challenge in terms of the number of projects we have and how many are due for compliance, regulatory and legal reasons that we need to deliver versus how many we need to actually do from a digitalization point of view. So those conversations are currently ongoing on how to better either invest or utilize our time. And that is part of also prioritization, i.e. reviewing at the priority that we have for each line of business or directorates in the council. Absolutely, what you just mentioned is absolutely correct.
Thank you very much, Leonardo. So I know this is a really high level report, and so one of the things that I'm going to ask board members to do is highlight issues that they think we should look at in the future, and maybe you come back with a more detailed report on. Because I think if we try to go into detail on every topic in this paper, we'd be here until the end of the week, if I'm honest. But also just to manage members' expectations, that I'm very happy for questions, but it might not be able to go into detail in all the questions at this stage. But I'm keen to get topics to come back to and have a sort of a closer look at. With that, I think I saw Councillor Robinson first, so I'll bring you in, Councillor Robinson.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I think welcome, Leonardo, because I know this is your first scrutiny meeting as well, and thank you for the comprehensive report. I think there's three elements to this. There's the resource challenge that you just mentioned that follow on from the point I made earlier, and for me, this is essential to move the council forward. This is the direction of travel, and I 100% appreciate what Leonardo has said about capacity. There is what is the legal and essential work that needs to be done versus the desirable, and it would be useful for the scrutiny board to understand that and where we are moving forward with it. The second element is the digital skills of citizens, and I think there's more to be. It's within the report, but I think there's more to be done. How we can inspire young people to pursue the digital agenda, particularly skills agenda, how we work with SMEs and transition SMEs post-COVID to really embracing this agenda too. That is not something that I know is the day-to-day of the council, but I think it's something that will improve the local ecosystem for us, the local digital capital in Leeds, but across West Yorkshire too. And I guess the thing that you mentioned there, Chair, which are the things to look into, I'd be really interested to looking into the self-serve element. I think it frustrates residents when they report. I'll give you an example. They report missed bins. They don't have any acknowledgement that the bins have been missed. And then so they're emailing their councillor 36 hours later. And you're saying to them, well, have you reported it? They're saying, yes, but I don't know it's been reported. So there's elements that we create work for ourselves in that sense. The second element of that is actually ring fencing some funds for the apprenticeship levy to go towards this agenda, particularly as we look at how we employ staff, but how we upskill staff as well. And I'd be interested in the thoughts of officers, but how we pursue that too.
Thank you. Looks like Bev wants to comment on that. So I'll bring you in, Bev.
Thanks. Yes, that's a really good question, Councillor Robinson. In terms of the apprentice levy, we do have some apprenticeships that they are predominantly for our own staff, and I take on board the points that were made earlier around doing business analysis, doing business intelligence skills. So it's something we have set aside some of the apprentice levy to do, but it's maybe worth looking at in more detail to say, are there additional areas where we could utilise that? There's one other point that I'd just like to sort of come back on as well around the digital skills. So we've got the digital skills within DIS or integrated digital services, as it will be called going forward. We've got the citizen skills, but there is also our workforce that was mentioned, wider within the council, I think that was mentioned earlier. So digital leadership is one thing, but we've also got to consider that as we bring new technologies online, and particularly with 365, whereas we can provide some level of sort of training and guidance, there's something to consider about how ready our workforce are just to adopt those things, because there is a lot of change that comes on when you've got a cloud-hosted system, and it will just be different one day. So I think that's another aspect we certainly need to be mindful of. Thank you.
Thank you. Leonardo?
Yes, I would like to add to what Bev is saying, because we are definitely seeing that. When we pushed for teams the earlier of this year, we have seen an increase of calls to our service desk. And now that we are trying to move data to online as part of 365, we also see a large number of calls hitting our service desk, and to create a bottleneck there. So absolutely, that point actually is valid, is there. And we were discussing it this morning, but that point also to review our induction process, when it comes to digital skills, and also reviewing the readiness of our staff, as Bev was alluding, which is something we're seeing more and more. And there is a pace that we are trying to move to, but definitely we cannot forget about our colleagues as well. In terms of your earlier point on capacity and prioritization, and this being essential in terms of moving forward, yes, we can bring back a more detailed conversation. We do actually have a lot of analysis that has been already done, which will be part of conversation next week with the corporate leadership team. So more than happy actually to bring that back in terms of give you that visibility on how our work, really how stretched or how our workforce is spread, and therefore how quickly we can not only bring in technology, but also implement them in the right way. So more than happy to bring that back.
Thank you, Leonardo. Councillor Robinson.
Sorry, I think that might have been a historic hand there. I think
Okay.
officers have a question. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you. My questions are on page 72. And regarding the agency, it says that our inability to recruit, and so therefore you have to use agency and contract workers. While using agency and contract workers, I just want to know, is there been advert to try and, why are we unable to recruit? What's our inability? Is it the specialists, etc.? And then to go on to ask, with regards to, it's saying down here that we might be looking at the possibility of compulsory redundancy. We have an inability to recruit, so why is that then? And why would we then be looking at the possibly compulsory redundancy? And it says there that 3 to 4 staff each year is a 2-year program. Could the program be longer in order for us to have, if it's specialist skill, that they become specialists going on further on? So those are my questions with regards to the agency. And we do keep it saying for you stay with us for less than 2 years. That's what you're going to reduce it. So while you have agency, what are we doing to recruit, whatever the inability to get those staff?
Okay, so Bev can jump in as well. So let me start with our inability to recruit. Okay, so there is a technology gap that we have in our digital team to start with when it comes to use new technology. Okay, which we can definitely bridge with training. Sometimes the training required takes time to actually implement, and if those time to train the people is not satisfactory in terms of giving a response, then at that point we might have to use contractors to actually fulfill a specific requirement, for example, regulatory or from a legal perspective. Sometimes that happens also on the project side. And so that is an area where we have to do that. Other times, particularly when it comes to cloud technology, which we know it is getting better now in 2021, but it's still not always easy to find also those resources in the market. So we're struggling to find some of those resources, and when we find them, actually the salary they command are really, really expensive, particularly from permanent positions. And therefore, in most cases, we actually end up to recruit some temporary agency staff for a specific piece of work. Moving forward, we do not want to continue that unless it is absolutely necessary. And if we recruit contractors or temporary agency, we want for that knowledge to be brought in-house. We have conversation ongoing at the moment with the like of Amazon Web Services, where as part of doing work in the future with the council, they will have to train a number of people, which we will make mandatory at their own cost, which is good news in terms of training people. But that will also go against our problem of capacity, because we don't, in some cases, we don't even have the capacity to actually train the people. So our vision or our mission is to not use recruiting contractors or temporary agency, but we will be definitely in a position where we have to use them because of timing, because they are the only one which have knowledge of a particular technology. But where we have the situation, we will bring them in and we will only use them for a specific period of time. I know in the past we had a situation where contractors have been here for longer than 2 years. That's something we are not prepared to do that anymore, so we will remove that. There are conversations ongoing about an academy for digital, which is also connecting not only to train our staff, but also to train citizens as well. So it's a work in progress task of training our people, fulfill the commitments and requests that are coming through from the council and wider, and combining those with the resource capacity, the technology gap, and the timing of request of delivering. So that's one part of the answer. Perhaps, Bev, you want to come in on the compulsory point?
Yeah, sure. If I can just sort of pick up Councillor Hamilton's point around the recruitment. So we actually have had previous scrutiny inquiries as well, so all those papers are available. And to be fair, some of the challenges are the same. So within Leeds particularly, and sort of like the wider sort of like Yorkshire area, there are so many companies who are all seeking the same types of skills at the same time, and in some cases paying significantly higher salaries, particularly in the private sector, but even sometimes within sort of public sector areas. So so that, in terms of sort of the question, coming back to the redundancies, I'll come to that in a moment, but we do have some skills which are very niche. So being a security specialist, for example, is very, very different to being an IT application developer or working in project management. So whilst we have, in some areas, we are fine and we have no challenges in recruiting or developing our own talent, it is these niche skills and the things that we referenced within the paper where we really sort of struggle. So in terms of those, the potential compulsory redundancies we referenced, that they are people who are doing what we call application supports, and that's on the back of looking at different ways of working and trying to work in more efficient ways. And certainly in terms of the industry, we've probably got more people supporting applications than we need, because we're doing lots of project work. So we are working with HR to obviously go through the relevant processes and try and support those people into those roles. And there's very, very strong possibility now that we will support those into those roles within DIS, but it won't be the areas where we're sort of struggling, like around sort of security roles, which is where Leonardo's referring to having agency staff that have been in those areas for a long time. I think it does come back as well to the continued sort of growth in demand as well, which Leonardo has already referenced, in that whereas we have trained people up in security, and we've done that really successfully internally from our own staff in a bid to release the contract to the agency workers. The demand is just coming through so fast that we never get to that point. There is always new work that needs to be done. So that's another challenge that we have to overcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Councillor Hamilton. Yep, good. Okay, so just in terms of work, it feels to me like there's probably still a few areas that we as a board would like to look at, and I think the areas I've got written down are sort of the prioritisation of projects, because I think that's really key, especially when you're so resource constrained. Resource and capacity management, and I think that's particularly relevant because of the shared service element with the CCG. I think the workforce planning agenda is really interesting, and I think it'd be really helpful if you could bring some of that back, because next in the July board we're having a discussion about agency staff anyway. It's on the work plan already, so I think that's quite linked, because there's so much spent on agency staff, and clearly this is an element of that agency staff spend, so that's good. There's the areas that Councillor Robertson suggested on digital skills, and I imagine that's quite hard to prioritise at the moment if you're resource constrained and it's non-essential, but I still think that is a very interesting point that he raises. And the self-service point he makes, and I think that probably links, Rob, for the notes, with the call centre stuff that we were talking about earlier with Neil, and so if we can connect that to Neil's report, I think that would be more logical. Is that okay with you, Councillor Robinson, to link that?
I think it makes sense doing it that way, yeah.
Yeah, so if you make that note, Rob. Yep. And then the other thing, we haven't talked about it today, but we talked about it previously, Leonardo, is around the process for FOIs. I think that's just the governance piece that I think we should probably talk about in more detail.
Okay.
Assuming board members aren't unhappy with me doing that. I can see people generally okay. So it feels like we've got a few pieces of work to go into more detail with, but very much appreciate what you've written in this paper. It's really helpful for us to get a sort of a big picture understanding of the challenges your team faces. I can't see anyone indicating, but I don't know if Councillor Cooper, you want to comment on any of that or the work programme.
And I just to say thank you to the digital team, to Leonardo, to Bevan, and the team for all the work that they're undertaking at the moment. I know that it's a huge ask for them currently, and I just want to show my thanks to them for all the work that they're doing as well. And I'm sure as Scrutiny takes your work forward on the digital front as well, that we'll have much more opportunity to discuss in more detail. I know you're probably more rushed for time this morning, Chair, so thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Yeah, absolutely. I think this board appreciates the work that the team are putting in as well. And we recognise the challenge, and that's one of the reasons why we're bringing Scrutiny Focus here, is to make sure not only do you deliver, but also you get the resources to be able to do that. So I think that's a key element of what we're doing. So thank you very much. Thanks, Leonardo. I can't see anyone else indicating, so I'm going to move on to the next agenda item, which I think is agenda item 8 and sources of work. So I'll just pass on to Rob, then if you've got anything to comment, and then any members who want to make comments.
Thank you, Councillor Scopes. Yeah, just briefly. So this item is here to identify any areas of work that members may wish to consider for the year ahead. Traditional areas of where we may source that from the Best Council plan. We've already considered the performance report earlier on the agenda. And then other sources would include financial information. The board does cover the budget of the council. So really the item is on here to take up any views from members on where they would like the work programme to go in municipal year 21-22. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Firth and then Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to raise 2 points, really. I know that we've raised it previously. It'd be interesting for the board to look into how the council is managing electoral services, given the situation that we have a significant increase in number of postal voters, and just more generally to look at how we're managing that process, because of the simple fact that we are in a total new normal. But I wanted to ask whether it may be possible to potentially look more generally at the economic situation more generally across the city. This board obviously looks at how we can support our city's growth and also more generally help our high streets, and it may be useful to look at the health of our high streets and businesses at a future meeting later on this year. Basically to make sure that this council is doing as much as we can to support them, be it the grants that we're providing from government funding, or be it more generally support or otherwise, whether there is anything else that we're not doing that potentially organisations, for example, the Business Improvement District, etc., may feel that we need to be doing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much for both those comments, Councillor Firth. I definitely take those away. I see Rob's making notes frantically, so that's helpful. Councillor Robinson.
Just to reiterate the point made earlier about council tax collection and getting that breakdown, and how we can investigate how members can understand more about it and how we can direct residents to support as well.
Thank you for that as well. I think that could be an interesting piece of work. And we talked earlier about the spend, and whether that would be appropriate to look at the same time in the pre-meeting. I'm saying it now for the public meeting. Councillor Carlisle.
Thanks, Chair. It's something I think one of Councillor Hamilton's questions earlier triggered this thought in me. I might need some explanation from Rob of whether this is within this board, but we've obviously covered the kind of contact centre in terms of the council, and then how people can digitally request assistance with services. Obviously, one of the other things that's been really difficult during the pandemic is the way we communicate to residents across the city, the way we engage, the way we consult, etc. I notice we cover communications and marketing. I know a lot of engagement is done within individual services, but obviously we've switched to digital engagement and communication as a first throughout this, learning quite a lot around that. And it's when we've had engagement pieces across the council, that's been a real assistance, but there are some people that are probably missing out from that face-to-face engagement we've had. And I just wondered whether our communications side that's covered in this board covers some of the council's approach to consulting and engaging with our residents to make sure that we are continuing throughout this to explain the work of the council and to get our message out there.
Go on, Rob.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Carlisle. Yeah, well, the council's communications services does fall within our remit, so that certainly would seem to be appropriate. If it's more generally around consultation on specific issues, I guess we could end up going into different boards' remits, but the processes that I think you're referring to through the communications team do sit with this board, yes.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really valid point, and I also think sort of the more general corporate messages around what's the council doing and why is it doing it, sort of up educating things like people, for example, people know that council tax has gone up, but actually the resources available to the council have gone down. It's a very difficult message to articulate, but surely we should be making some effort to articulate that to the wider population, that there is real challenges for the council. And I think that's the sort of corporate message that we could be looking at. Councillor Cooper.
Just in terms of trying to be helpful for the board, Councillor Scopes, I think that as part of the contact centre review that's been undertaken from it moving across to the corporate director, is some of the communication that goes out. So when people contact the council, either by telephone, email, or through the front door, when that's possible, is to see what sort of communication then turns into a further contact. So somebody needs further help or assistance or something. So that is also being looked at under that review. I think that it's important that as a scrutiny board that you have a bit of clarity on this, because there are a number of scrutiny boards that deal with specific services and directorates, and so it's difficult. What I would say is that we don't really want to veer into other scrutiny boards work either. I'm thinking particularly, and I'm thankful that we've got exec board member for communities on the call, because I'm thinking in particular of the communities scrutiny board that Councillor Barry Anderson chairs, and I know that he's done some work in the past as their scrutiny board on issues such as this as well. So maybe it's something, Chair, that you may want to take away and look to see what other boards are doing on that. I think when Rob mentioned the communications department, that's not necessarily every letter that goes out from the council. And I think Councillor Carl was trying to be helpful, thinking about how do we write to our residents and service users. But it would be different on different boards as well. You may need to do some joint working on that one, I think, or at least let them know that you're looking into stuff like that.
No, that's really helpful, Councillor Cooper. So what I'll do is I'll ask Rob to go away and work with the other principal scrutiny advisors to just do a bit of background work on exactly what would be in our remit, if anything, and how we could influence it. I think that's a really valid point. Councillor Robinson?
Sorry, Chair, I might have got the wrong end of the stick from what Councillor Carlo was trying to say. Was he attempting to think about the communication when we do consultations, or was it the communication in general?
Let's ask Councillor Carlo to.
I can come in. I think it was. I mean, the wider point and where it stemmed from is just obviously the way we would communicate with residents as a council, and I think I'm thinking about corporate messaging overall as the side. So those things that aren't, an individual request, we've missed your bin, whatever. Things like the council strategy, the best council plan, etc. Normally, we've had a huge number of engagements around that to make sure people are able to comment on those, to make sure we hear from residents, to make sure we're obviously going in the way that residents would like us to go as a city. The kind of way we do that has been upturned, I guess, by the pandemic. We might have learned some things about doing digital and virtual engagement. We might have found out some people that may have been excluded from that. So it was more about that, more the process of how we consult and engage with the community as a whole, I guess, rather than an individual message about an individual service or something. I think I was thinking of.
Perfect. Okay, now that clarifies it. Thank you.
Chair, can I just say that is why I asked that question with regards, the traffic with regards to the media, because they're saying how many thousands of people, so that's what I was talking about, where they're going to go to keep the public interests. We don't want it to be just because it's all about the pandemic. When that is calmed down a little bit, how are we going to keep up the traffic of people? So those are the sort of things that I was asking to see when it come back, if that's what they were planning to do.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. That's a fair point. I think it's probably a sensible time to move on to the work schedule, which is next agenda item. I think the interesting page on this is page 143 of your pack. So we're obviously in June now, and we've got stuff for July. In September, the contact centre, that point about self-service is that Councillor Robinson made, is already in there, which is positive. But we'll take away what's been raised in this meeting and have a good conversation with Rob and other scrutiny advisors about how we fit other pieces of work that we have discussed today into that. I think there'll be a few items that will probably have to come back a few times. And we also need to make sure we keep space for, in case there's an emergency item or something like that that comes up. But I welcome all the comments that have been made so far, and I think we can definitely find room for hopefully all of it, certainly most of it, on the work schedule over the next year. Does anyone have comments on the work programme in particular? No. Okay, great. The next item is the date of the next meeting, which is scheduled for the 19th of July. We seem to be quite good at scheduling our work programs for the hopefully last day of lockdown restrictions. As I said in our pre-meeting, I've got a call with the other scrutiny chairs to have a discussion this evening. So if you have strong views, please drop me an email before 4 o'clock and I'll try and take those on board. Last time we tried to be unified and all come to one position, which is then, I feel like it's quite a good thing if we can all do the same thing, rather than making it political about who's doing what. And we came to consensus last time, so hopefully we'll manage that again. Are there any comments that people want to make at this? Sorry, Councillor Robinson.
When they unify and make us the guinea pig, that'll be what's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. But it's nice just to be able to, to be fair, Councillor Anderson and Lamb were very much on board with the plan we made this time. So hopefully we'll be able to do something similar again. I think one of the big challenges is around if we have in-person meetings, how we limit those to 90 minutes or if we have breaks. And I think what I wouldn't want to do is not do the work we need to do, but equally I think after 90 minutes having a break's probably not a bad thing, but it's how long that break needs to be before we come back in and do the rest of the agenda. So we'll talk to officers about it later, and once we have a plan, I'll let board members know. Good. I'm seeing nods, but no one else indicating that they wish to speak. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for attendance today. I think we've had some really useful conversations. Thanks for the officers for your support and exec members for your comments.